Some of the best trust builders I have ever seen are criminals. I have a PhD in criminology and I've spent years leading fraud prevention organisations and advising businesses and government on how to prevent financial crime. And the longer that I've spent in this space, the more convinced I've become that the people who are the best in the world at building trust quickly, convincingly and at scale are not the leaders or consultants we hold up as role models. They're fraudsters. Now, before you click off, I'm not saying that fraud is something to admire. The harm is real and it is devastating, and I've spent my entire career trying to stop it. But here's what I know from the research. Fraudsters understand the mechanics of trust in a way that most legitimate professionals simply do not. They know how trust is built, they know how it is signalled, they know exactly which psychological levers to pull and when. And the truth is, most of us have never thought about trust that carefully in our lives. So I'm going to break down exactly what they do, the psychology behind it, where their skill comes from, and what it means for anyone trying to build genuine authority in a world where trust is getting harder and harder to earn. There's a famous psychology textbook that explains exactly how to manipulate people, but the fraudsters have never read it. In the 1980s, a psychologist documented 6 principles of human influence. It became one of the most influential books in the history of marketing and sales, not criminology. It is also, according to decades of peer-reviewed research, a near-perfect description of how social engineering and fraud works. Researchers have analysed thousands of phishing emails, investment scams, romance fraud cases, and what they find over and over again is that fraudsters deploy these exact principles, often in combination, often with remarkable precision. They impersonate executives, institutions, government bodies. They perform credibility in every signal they send, the tone, the language, the logos, the email signature. They fake testimonials and fabricate track records to build social proof through manufactured consensus. And they become whoever you need them to be. Warm, funny, similar to you, interested in the same things. One study found that liking them and showing authority together are the strongest predictors of whether someone will be able to successfully defraud you. But here's what I find most interesting about all of this. He was not inventing these principles. He was merely documenting human behaviour that already existed. Behaviour that fraudsters have already figured out through trial and error, through practice, through years of honing what works. They did not learn this from a book. They learned it from people, which means these principles work on all of us. Not because we're naive, but because we're human. But where does that skill actually come from? Some of the most skilled manipulators in the world learn to read people before they learn to read. One of the things that keeps coming back up in research over and over again is this question: where does the skill to manipulate actually come from? Because fraudsters are extraordinarily good at reading people, at knowing what someone needs to hear, at becoming whoever the room needs them to be. And that does not come from nowhere. There's a growing body of research on what we call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and what they do to a child's development. And one of the things trauma does, particularly in unpredictable or threatening environments, is produce heightened sensitivity to other people's emotional states. A child who grows up not knowing what mood they're going to walk into, they learn to read a room and fast. They learn to perform safety, to say the right thing, to become whoever keeps them out of harm's way. That's a survival mechanism, and it maps onto what makes someone an effective manipulator in adulthood. A 2024 peer-reviewed study of women who committed corporate fraud found that many of them traced the origins of deception back to their childhood. One participant describes how lies and secrets began aged 10. Another, she said, learned to lie young specifically to generate love and praise. Academics documented these principles in a library, but some fraudsters learn them in their childhood bedrooms. Now, I'm not saying this to excuse what they do. The harm is real and it's serious. But if you want to understand how trust gets built and broken at the highest level, you have to understand where that skill comes from. Why does this matter more than ever now? Well, AI just handed fraudsters a superpower, and there's only one thing that it cannot fake. But first, here's some numbers that should stop you in your tracks. Between May 2024 and April 2025, AI-enabled scams increased by 456%. Over 80% of phishing emails are now created with the help of AI, and fraudsters can produce convincing scams up to 40% faster than before. Deepfakes increased fourfold in 2024, In one case in the UK, a finance worker was deceived into transferring thousands of pounds after a fraudster used AI to recreate his colleagues in a live video call. 70% of people now say it's become harder to identify scams than it was a year ago. Here's what that means for us. The surface signals of trust, the polished language, professional presentation, institutional tone, a convincing face on a screen, they are all now too easy to replicate, which means they are stopping working. When everyone can fake the signals lose their value. The heuristics that we've relied on for decades, does this look professional? Does it sound credible? Does it feel right? Are being systematically undermined. And that creates a very specific problem for anyone trying to build genuine authority right now. Because here's the thing about AI and fraud. The fraudster's advantage is speed and surface. They can spin up a convincing identity in minutes. What they cannot do is sustain it under scrutiny. They cannot fake a track record. They cannot manufacture longitudinal presence. They cannot replicate the kind of detail that only comes from actually knowing what you're talking about over time, in public, and consistently. Depth beats surface every time, but only if you've built that depth. So the 4 things the criminal playbook teaches us about building real trust. And this is what legitimate professionals should actually do differently. We need to remember that fraud is a mirror. It reflects back to us which cognitive shortcuts we rely on, which signals we trust, and exactly where those can be exploited. And if you pay attention to that mirror, there are 4 things that it teaches you. 1, trust is built in sequence, not in one transaction. Credibility first, relationship second, and then ask a third. Fraudsters know this. Most professionals lead with the offer and skip the groundwork entirely. 2, authority is performed, not just claimed. Every signal you send, your tone, your credentials, your consistency, your visual presence contributes to or undermines whether people trust you. Fraudsters are meticulous about this. Most professionals are not. 3, urgency is the enemy of trust. If your authority infrastructure is working, you should never need to rush anyone. Pressure creates suspicion in informed audiences. The fraudster uses urgency because they need to close before you can think. You should not need to. And finally, 4, in an AI world, depth beats surface. When trust signals are cheap to replicate, the differentiator becomes what cannot be manufactured at scale. Genuine expertise, longitudinal presence, and detail that only comes from actually knowing your field, inside out, over time, in public and consistently. The professionals who will build the most durable authority in the next decade are the ones who understand the mechanics of trust, not just the ethics of it. I've written a fuller version of this argument with all the research behind it over on my Substack. The link is in the bio, and if this series made you think, share it with someone who is building a business, a career, a following, wherever they're building authority, because they need to hear this.